Okay, let's unpack this. We are embarking on a deep dive into the life of Walter Elias Disney, a name that, well, it fundamentally changed how entertainment is created, consumed, and experienced, not just in America, but globally.
Indeed. And when you look at the biographical and historical sources we have, what immediately jumps out is that the man behind the brand wasn't just an artist. That's almost the easy part to understand.
Right.
He was an expert strategist, a relentless technical innovator, and an entrepreneur who, he understood synergy decades before that became a business school buzzword.
That is the mission today. For anyone out there who wants a shortcut to understanding the sheer scope of his impact beyond, the famous characters, we are sifting through these sources to isolate the key innovations and the monumental achievements.
It's quite a journey.
It is. We want to track that incredible path from his humble Midwestern origins, his early struggles, right up to his status as the individual record holder for the most Academy Awards ever won.
And that number is just staggering when you really think about it.
22 competitive Oscars plus 4 honorary ones. That is a truly mind-boggling 26 total awards. And it reflects an influence across documentaries, feature films, animation, technical categories, everything.
It's an influence that spanned, well, every medium he touched: animation, live-action film production, television, and even physical architecture. The sources detail how he repeatedly leveraged new technologies. Sometimes he had to invent them just to enhance the storytelling.
To make the seemingly impossible possible.
Exactly. So we'll explore how those foundational years in the heartland really prepared him, how his response to some pretty brutal early business failures drove his most important creations, and ultimately how his incredibly high standards built an empire that has endured.
Precisely. We're starting where the dreams began, right in the American Midwest, and then we're going to move chronologically through all the technical revolutions he launched in Hollywood, culminating in his final, really expansive visions for immersive physical experiences that, they define modern leisure.
Yeah.
Let's start with the roots. Walt Disney was born in Chicago, December 5th, 1901. But the sources are very, very clear that the real emotional and the creative foundation for his life was laid far from the city lights.
Absolutely. While Chicago was his birthplace, he was raised primarily in Marceline, Missouri, and he consistently described this period as one of the happiest and most formative of his entire life.
It seems to be the source of everything.
It really was. Marceline, the small, idealistic town, it became the wellspring of his creative vision. It wasn't just a place he lived, it became the architectural and thematic blueprint for Main Street, USA later on.
We did parks, yeah.
It was this nostalgic, perfected version of the American heartland that he carried with him forever.
And it's right there in Marceline where we see his earliest attempts at art. The sources note this incredibly humble beginning. He was paid to draw a retired neighborhood doctor's horse.
Right, which showed that early aptitude for capturing life visually. But beyond that, professional work, he was diligently developing his skills. He was copying cartoons, specifically those by Ryan Walker from the Appeal to Reason newspaper, and working a ton with watercolors and crayons.
The visual interest was clearly there, but so too was this early fascination with machinery and infrastructure.
The trains.
The trains. He lived near the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe railway line, and his love for trains became this profound, lifelong obsession.
And that dual influence, you have this nostalgic small-town life on one hand, and this powerful industrial machinery on the other, that is so key to understanding the aesthetic of his later work.
However, that sort of ideal vision of childhood in Marceline was soon replaced by the intense rigor of life in Kansas City, where the family moved. For more than 6 years, his schedule was just brutal because of his job delivering newspapers.
That work ethic, bordering on grueling, is such an essential detail. He was delivering the Kansas City Times starting at 4:30 in the morning before school.
4:30 a.m.
And then the Star in the evening. This double shift was physically exhausting. It often led to him falling asleep in class, getting poor grades. But the sources really highlight that this experience, as difficult as it was, built an extraordinary level of resilience, of punctuality, and a discipline he carried into his entire professional career.
It was the grit beneath the creative dream.
That's a perfect way to put it.
And despite that rigorous schedule, he still prioritized formal art study. He attended Saturday courses at the Kansas City Art Institute. And after the family moved back to Chicago in 1917, he continued with night courses at the Chicago Academy of Fine Arts. He was driven, he was always seeking out knowledge and formal training, even if his schoolwork suffered.
And this self-directed hustle, both artistic and entrepreneurial, it continued as he tried to join the war effort. He was actually too young to join the U.S. Army, so he famously forged his birth certificate to join the Red Cross as an ambulance driver.
He didn't even get to France until after the armistice in September 1918, right?
Right. But even there, he was turning his vehicle into a canvas, he was drawing cartoons on the side of his ambulance, and managed to get his work published in the Army newspaper, Stars and Stripes. He was always selling, always creating.
So when he returns in 1919, he's ready for commercial work. He starts as an apprentice artist at Pisman Rubin Commercial Art Studio in Kansas City. And this is the fateful moment. This is where he meets and befriends Ub Iwerks.
An incredibly talented animator and artist, just a genius in his own right, who would become his most crucial technical partner.
And that friendship immediately translated into their first independent venture, Iwerks Disney Commercial Artists.
Which was very short-lived. It failed pretty quickly due to a lack of clients, but it showed that Disney was restless. He was constantly seeking independence. So the pivot led him to the Kansas City Film Ad Company, and this is where he truly became fascinated by the emerging medium of animation. He was moving away from just static commercial illustration.
That curiosity drove him home to experiment. He literally taught himself animation using a borrowed book, Edwin G. Lutz's animated cartoons, and a camera.
Oh.
So what was the critical technical breakthrough he realized during this intense period of self-study?
The key realization was about the limitations of the technology his company was using, which was cutout animation.
So just moving flat paper figures under the camera.
Exactly. And Disney realized that cell animation drawing or painting onto transparent celluloid sheets was far, far superior. It allowed for much smoother, more fluid movement because only the parts that moved, like a character's arms or mouth, had to be redrawn on each cell layer while the backgrounds could remain constant.
So it was a huge leap in efficiency and quality.
A massive leap. And this technical preference for cell animation over cutout was Disney's first major commitment to innovation, purely for the sake of quality.
And he quickly acted on this realization. He founded Laugh-O-Gram Studio in 1921, hiring early talent like Iwerks, Fred Harmon, and Hugh Harmon, producing these modernized fairy tales. But the sources note that, like his previous venture, Laugh-O-Gram struggled financially.
It did. The studio's ambitions outpaced its capitalization. So to try and generate some revenue, Disney produced Alice's Wonderland in 1923.
And this was an early experiment in blending media, right?
It was. It combined live-action footage featuring a young actress named Virginia Davis with animation. And while it showcased a really promising new format, it just arrived too late to save the studio from bankruptcy.
The financial failure fueled his decision to head west. He arrives in Hollywood in July 1923, not initially planning to pursue animation, but hoping to become a live-action director. Fate, however, had other plans.
It certainly did. A distribution contract arrived from a New York distributor, Margaret J. Winkler, for those Alice comedies. She needed a fresh series. And with that foundational contract, Walt and his brother Roy formed the Disney Brothers Studio, which eventually became the Walt Disney Company.
This confirmed that indispensable partnership. Walt as the creative visionary, and Roy as the absolutely necessary financial manager and organizational backbone.
They established the first official Walt Disney Studio at 2725 Hyperion Avenue in 1926.
And the character that brought them their first real taste of success was Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, created in 1927 for Universal Pictures. They developed Oswald to be peppy, alert, saucy, and venturesome. He was a modern, energetic cartoon star.
Oswald was popular, the studio was succeeding, but this success led to a devastating business realization in 1928. When Disney traveled to New York to renegotiate his contract with his distributor, Charles Mintz, he discovered something shocking.
Mintz intended to cut his pay, and crucially, that Universal owned the intellectual property rights to Oswald.
And then, to add insult to injury, Mintz proceeded to hire away most of Disney's animation staff.
That sounds like a catastrophic blow. How did the sources portray the fallout from this, and how did it change Disney's future strategy?
It was absolutely devastating. He lost almost his entire team and the popular character he had created. But here's the crucial turning point. The sources emphasized that this event was the ultimate, painful business education. It instantly solidified his absolute, non-negotiable insistence on retaining 100% intellectual property ownership of all future creations.
So the financial failure of Laugh-O-Gram, combined with the IP betrayal of Oswald.
That's what forced the creation of a character he truly owned, and it cemented the importance of protecting his relationship with his single most loyal artist, Ub Iwerks, who refused to leave the studio.
So the stage is set. The loss of Oswald demanded an immediate high-stakes replacement. This brings us to Section 3. the birth of an icon, and the sound revolution.
Necessity truly is the mother of invention here. Disney and iWorks went straight to work creating Mickey Mouse. The sources suggest iWorks was just critical in refining Disney's provisional sketches, simplifying the character's design to make him easier to animate efficiently.
And demonstrating his personal connection to the character, Disney himself became the original voice of Mickey.
A role he maintained all the way until 1947.
And we get that wonderful anecdote about the naming of the character, which really speaks to the collaboration and family input. Disney originally wanted to call him Mortimer Mouse.
Which sounds so stuffy now.
It does. But his wife Lillian suggested the name Mickey, finding Mortimer too formal, a great historical intervention. And Mortimer, of course, later appeared as a rival for Minnie Mouse.
A great piece of trivia. They quickly produced two shorts, Plain Crazy and The Gallopin' Gaucho, but despite their quality, they failed to find a distributor. And the reason why is simple. They were silent, but Disney was paying very close attention to the broader entertainment landscape.
And the major shift came with the release of The Jazz Singer in 1927, which demonstrated the incredible power of synchronized sound and film. Disney immediately saw this as the future, not just some passing trend.
He immediately pivoted. Instead of trying to sell the silent films, he decided to produce a third short, Steamboat Willie, in 1928, specifically designed for post-produced synchronized sound. This decision made Steamboat Willie the first cartoon featuring a fully post-produced soundtrack with music, sound effects, and voice all timed perfectly.
And how did he actually achieve this technological feat?
He signed a contract with Pat Powers to use the Powers Endophone recording system. The breakthrough wasn't just having sound, but meticulously cinching the sound effects and the musical score to the animated actions. It was a task that required intensive frame-by-frame planning.
And this innovation made the sound cartoons instantly popular.
It propelled Mickey Mouse into international stardom. The character gained unique regional names like Michael Mouse in Germany and Saussure in France, which just highlights that global appeal from day one.
This is exactly what the critique highlighted. Disney's consistent tendency to embrace new technology to enhance storytelling. Synchronized sound wasn't just a novelty, it was a fundamental elevation of the entire narrative experience.
Precisely. And to handle the complexity of sound and music, he hired the composer and arranger Carl Stalling. Stalling's involvement led to the suggestion for the Silly Symphony series, which was an exercise in pure musical storytelling.
The first one was The Skeleton Dance in 1929.
Drawn entirely by iWorks, and it proved that music could drive the entire narrative structure of a short film.
This period really cemented the foundation of the Disney character pantheon. Following Mickey's success, we saw the introduction of Pluto in 1930, Goofy in 1932, and of course Donald Duck in 1934. But Disney didn't rest on the success of sound. He immediately focused on the next technological frontier, color.
And this is where his business genius really shines alongside his artistic vision. Recognizing the potential of full color and backed by a new distribution deal, Disney decided to film Flowers and Trees in 1932 using the complex three-strip Technicolor process.
And the sources reveal a monumental business move here. Can you elaborate on the competitive impact of that Technicolor negotiation?
It was ruthless business strategy paired with artistic conviction. Disney negotiated a contract that granted him the sole right to use the expensive, high-quality, three-strip Technicolor process in animation until August of 1935.
A 3-year exclusive deal.
A 3-year exclusivity agreement that essentially crippled every rival animation studio. While his competitors were stuck with cheaper, less vibrant two-strip processes or just black and white, Disney's films were bursting with this unprecedented, gorgeous color. It gave the Disney studio an undeniable competitive advantage and made their shorts feel vastly superior and more modern.
That explains why Flowers and Trees was so successful. It won the very first Academy Award for Best Short Subject Cartoon in 1932. And he also received an honorary award that same year, specifically for the creation of Mickey Mouse. The industry was already acknowledging that he was setting the standard.
The successes just kept accelerating. In 1933, The Three Little Pigs became what one media historian called the most successful short animation of all time. It won another Academy Award and further solidified the studio's financial footing. They had to expand the staff significantly to nearly 200 people by the end of 1933.
And this success drove a critical realization that was maybe more important than any single technological advance, and that was the importance of deep, emotionally gripping narrative.
Absolutely. Disney realized that just having technical prowess or, funny gags wasn't enough. He needed emotional investment from the audience. This led to another profound innovation, the professionalization of the story process.
The story department.
He invested heavily in a dedicated story department, completely separate from the animators. He hired specialized storyboard artists whose sole function was to detail the plot, structure the gags, and ensure complete narrative coherence and emotional payoff. This move cemented the idea that Disney was fundamentally a story company, not just a cartoon factory.
All this success, all this structure, and all these refined techniques, it all prepared the studio for the biggest gamble of Disney's entire career, the feature film. This decision ushered in the golden age of animation, starting around 1934.
Disney was simply dissatisfied with the limited scope and duration of shorts. He became convinced that a feature-length cartoon, a full, 83 minutes of emotional storytelling, would be vastly more profitable and artistically fulfilling, even though it required a colossal, unprecedented effort.
And that conviction led directly to Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs in 1937.
It's hard to imagine today, but the skepticism at the time was enormous. Industry insiders called the project Disney's folly, predicting it would bankrupt the company.
It was estimated to cost $250,000, but it swelled to $1.5 million.
3 times over budget, and people just couldn't believe a cartoon could hold an audience's attention for that long.
So what drove him to spend so much time and money on this, especially when no one believed in it?
His dedication was twofold: a dedication to artistic realism and a dedication to emotional truth. He believed that for the audience to invest for 80 minutes, they needed to believe the characters were real. So he instituted this meticulous, almost academic approach.
Right, he sent his animators to extensive courses at the Chouinard Art Institute,
focusing on human and animal anatomy, on movement. And furthermore, he brought live animals and actors directly into the studio so the animators could study realistic movement firsthand. This was an unheard of level of rigor for the animation medium.
And this pursuit of realism and depth also led to the greatest technical innovation of this era, developed specifically to service the feature film, the multiplane camera.
The multiplane camera was a triumph of engineering and creative necessity. It was this massive vertical structure with multiple horizontal planes of glass, all set at different distances from the camera lens.
Okay, so you've got these different layers.
Exactly. Drawing cells and backgrounds were placed on these separate planes, and by moving the different layers incrementally and photographing them from above, the camera could create this astonishing illusion of depth, of dimension, and changing perspective as it traveled through a scene.
So it made the scene feel truly three-dimensional. It allowed the audience to feel like they were flying through the forest rather than just looking at a flat image.
Precisely. It solved the problem of the static, flat cartoon background. The first time they used it was in the silly symphony short The Old Mill in 1937, and its impressive visual power was so immediate it won an Academy Award for animated short film.
So even though Snow White was already far into production, he saw this and
he immediately ordered certain critical scenes, especially those requiring deep, layered forest backdrops, to be redrawn to take advantage of the stunning new depth effects that the multiplane camera offered.
the risk paid off spectacularly. Snow White premiered in December 1937 to universal high praise. It was instantly the most successful motion picture of 1938, and by May 1939, it had grossed $6.5 million, becoming the most successful sound film made up to that point. The folly was history.
The recognition was just iconic. Disney received that unique honorary Academy Award. One full-sized Oscar statuette accompanied by 7 miniature statuettes symbolizing Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs. This success immediately solidified the studio's status and launched the true golden age of animation.
And they immediately followed this triumph with an incredible run of masterpieces. Pinocchio and Fantasia, both in 1940, and Dumbo in 1941. Can we talk about Fantasia for a moment? Because it represents the high watermark of artistic ambition, but also incredible financial risk.
Fantasia represented Disney striving to legitimize animation as a true art form. He was marrying high-quality classical music with both abstract and narrative animation. It utilized advanced, labor-intensive techniques and was the first commercial film to be shown in stereophonic sound, which they called Fantasound.
But the sources note that while it was critically acclaimed for its artistic vision,
its high cost and the constraints of the emerging wartime environment meant its initial earnings were significantly hampered. It put a real financial strain on the studio.
which makes the subsequent film, Dumbo, a really interesting lesson in efficient production.
It is. Following the financial strain of Pinocchio and Fantasia, Dumbo was deliberately produced simply and inexpensively. It was short, it focused on a strong emotional core, and it avoided the complex realism of Snow White. This demonstrated the studio's versatility and its ability to deliver high-quality, beloved entertainment under very tight budgetary constraints. And it received positive critical and audience reception immediately upon its release.
As the studio enjoyed this golden age, the world shifted with the onset of World War II. Moving into Section 5, 1941 to 1950, the studio immediately pivoted its entire infrastructure to support the U.S. war effort.
And the sources show the speed of this transformation was incredible. Shortly after the U.S. entered the war, Disney formed the Walt Disney Training Films unit within the company. And they became indispensable to military and industrial training, producing a staggering volume of instruction films.
These weren't just simple cartoons, right? We're talking highly specific, complex educational tools.
Exactly. They were technical manuals brought to life. They covered highly specific skills and industrial processes, things like 4 methods of flesh riveting and aircraft production methods.
Wow.
This shift from animating fairy tale characters to animating complex machinery and technical diagrams demanded a whole new level of precision and clarity from the animators. The sources suggest this period really sharpened the studio's technical communication skills, which would prove vital later when they started designing theme park experiences.
And beyond training, they were essential for morale and propaganda. They produced propaganda shorts, most notably Der Fuhrer's Face, which actually won an Academy Award.
Yeah.
And they produced the feature-length animated documentary Victory Through Air Power in 1943.
Disney also worked directly with the government, specifically with Treasury Secretary Henry Morgenthau Jr., to produce Donald Duck shorts designed to promote the sale of war bonds to the public.
But while this work was crucial to the national effort, and it was conducted at cost, the sources confirmed that the revenue generated during this period was often only enough to cover expenses. The studio was still struggling.
They were, due to the low earnings from those costly earlier productions like Fantasia. The debt load was substantial. By 1944, the company owed $4 million to the Bank of America. And this is a crucial point, because it showcases the faith that major financial institutions had in the long-term vision of Walt Disney.
It's an incredible testament to his reputation.
It is. The bank's chairman and founder, Amedeo Gianni, stepped in and overruled any concerns. He told his executives, they're good this year, they're good next year, and they're good the year after. You have to relax and give them time to market their product. That high-level patient backing was essential. It allowed the company to weather the financial storm while maintaining its artistic integrity.
So, following the war, his brother Roy pushed for a clear financial strategy shift. More combined animation and live-action productions to manage costs. But Walt also initiated a new, entirely unexpected avenue for diversification that utilized his high standards in a brand new genre: the live-action nature documentary.
And that's the start of the highly popular True Life Adventures series. It was a radical shift for an animation studio. It began with Seal Island in 1948, which immediately won an Academy Award in the Best Short Subject category. The rigor and stunning cinematography they applied to these documentaries were immediately recognized.
The success of this series wasn't just commercial. It had a major cultural impact, promoting environmental appreciation. The sources note that Disney received the National Audubon Society's highest honor, the Audubon Medal, in 1955, specifically for promoting the appreciation and understanding of nature through these films.
It demonstrated that Disney's pursuit of excellence applied across any medium, fiction or nonfiction. The studio needed a major animated success to truly recover, however, and it came in 1950 with Cinderella.
Their first animated feature in 8 years, a calculated risk that paid off hugely. It cost $2.2 million, but earned nearly $8 million in its first year. A decisive financial comeback.
And it secured universal praise from critics and audiences. And as the animation stabilized, Disney expanded his focus on entirely live-action feature films, utilizing their cost-effectiveness and the audience appetite for wholesome entertainment. He produced his first entirely live-action feature, Treasure Island, in 1950.
Followed by popular films like The Story of Robin Hood and His Merry Men in 1952.
Right. The live-action division became a major source of stable revenue, with later classics like Old Yeller and Mary Poppins featuring these uplifting or patriotic themes. And by the mid-1950s, he was increasingly entrusting the daily animation operations to his senior animators, the famous 9 Old Men, because his focus had entirely shifted to his final, most expansive vision.
This is where the story pivots from celluloid to concrete. Section 6, The Age of Immersion, spanning 1950 to 1966. Disney began fusing storytelling, technology, and physical space in a way no one had conceived of before.
And the initial motivation, as the sources clearly articulate, was profoundly personal and really simple. Disney, while visiting Griffith Park in Los Angeles with his daughters, realized there was no single, clean, unspoiled park where both children and parents could enjoy themselves equally.
It was an unmet need he saw as a father.
Exactly. He was inspired by the pristine environment and careful layout of the Tivoli Gardens in Copenhagen, Denmark, recognizing the potential for an elevated, clean family experience.
He started planning in earnest in the early 1950s. This was an expensive, ambitious project completely outside the established studio model. So how did he structure the funding and design process to protect the main company?
This is a crucial business insight. To distance the massive financial risk from the publicly traded studio, he formed WED Enterprises, which stands for Walter Elias Disney and is now Walt Disney Imagineering in 1952.
And he funded the initial design team, whom he famously dubbed the Imagineers, using his own personal money and loans.
Right. This separate structure allowed them to be hyper-focused on design and engineering without the daily pressures of studio shareholders.
And the Imagineers' research was incredibly detailed, reflecting the same rigorous standards he applied to Snow White.
They adopted an almost academic approach to leisure design. Imagineers were sent to every amusement park in the U.S. to analyze what operational models worked, what thematic elements resonated, and critically, what common pitfalls like dirtiness or safety issues must be avoided at all costs. The final design was a synthesis of years of experience and months of meticulous research.
The final piece of the funding puzzle was secured through a massive synergy deal with the emerging medium of television, which is just a brilliant example of cross-platform monetization.
The deal was with the American Broadcasting Company, ABC. Their investment in the park was made contingent upon Disney producing television programs for their network. This was a revolutionary way to fund a physical infrastructure project using media content as both collateral and promotion.
And so, Disneyland opened in Anaheim, California in July 1955. The design itself was a masterpiece of storytelling and urban planning.
It was brilliantly conceptualized. It was structured as a series of themed lands: Adventureland, Frontierland, Fantasyland, and Tomorrowland, all radiating outward from a central hub. And the entry point, Main Street, USA, was a loving, detailed replica of the main street in Marceline, connecting the entire experience right back to his nostalgic Midwestern childhood.
The opening was an absolute media spectacle.
Broadcast live on ABC to an estimated 70 million viewers. And despite some early operational hiccups, the success was immediate and profound. Within a month, the park was attracting over 20,000 visitors a day, hosting 3.6 million guests in its first year.
And the New York Times encapsulated the reaction perfectly. They praised Disney for having tastefully combined some of the pleasant things of yesterday with fantasy and dreams of tomorrow.
A perfect summary. And that television synergy, which helped finance the park, quickly turned into a massive promotional tool for the studio.
It was a virtuous cycle.
Completely. The flagship show, Walt Disney's Disneyland, in 1954, was an anthology show that aired on ABC. It featured classic animated cartoons, live-action segments, and, crucially, behind-the-scenes material that promoted the park and upcoming films. That show was a phenomenal ratings success, achieving an audience share over 50%. Newsweek declared it an American institution by 1955.
And following that success came the Mickey Mouse Club, which became the first daily variety show specifically geared toward children.
This was mass merchandising perfection. It created an immediate, dedicated audience base while leveraging the characters and comics the company had been developing for decades. But the sources note that the ultimate measure of their cross-platform power came with a seemingly simple miniseries.
You must be talking about Davy Crockett.
Absolutely. The 5-part Davy Crockett miniseries, aired as part of the Disneyland anthology show, became an overnight sensation. It sparked a national craze for coonskin caps and frontier adventures. The theme song, The Ballad of Davy Crockett, sold an astonishing 10 million records.
10 million.
Which prompted Disney to form his own dedicated entity, Disneyland Records. This entire enterprise just shows the mastery of seamlessly integrating film, television, physical space, and music, feeding into the overall Disney experience.
His visionary focus wasn't limited to his own corporate projects, though. He applied his talents to national and global stages.
He became a sort of national consultant for imagination. He collaborated with NASA rocket designer Wernher von Braun on the Disneyland episode Man in Space, educating the public on futuristic possibilities. Globally, he acted as a consultant for the 1959 American National Exhibition in Moscow, where he contributed the popular 360-degree Circorama film, America the Beautiful.
He also chaired the pageantry committee for the 1960 Winter Olympics, personally designing the elaborate opening, closing, and medal ceremonies.
Right. And all of this work culminated in the incredible technological proving ground of the 1964 New York World's Fair. He developed 4 massive exhibits there, funded by corporate sponsors, that served as the beta tests for the future of theme park technology.
These exhibits were essential for testing the operational and artistic limits of what would become Imagineering's signature technologies. Let's detail those 4, because they represent the final stage of his technical mastery.
Okay. First, the partnership with PepsiCo and UNICEF.
That yielded It's a Small World.
A boat ride featuring hundreds of audio animatronic dolls. This defined the scale and reliability of that technology in a water-based attraction. Second, the Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln exhibit featured an animatronic Abraham Lincoln that was so lifelike, delivering excerpts from his speeches with realistic gestures and facial movements that it just stunned audiences.
Third, the Carousel of Progress.
Sponsored by General Electric. This featured a rotating theater that showed how electricity had improved life over the 20th century. It used animatronics and set pieces to demonstrate progress. And fourth, Ford's Magic Skyway portrayed the progress of mankind using the technology that would eventually become the Omnimover system.
What's so fascinating is that elements of all 4, the audio animatronics, the boat ride system, the rotating theater, the themed ride vehicles, were later permanently integrated and refined into Disneyland. The World's Fair was his R&D lab, paid for by sponsors.
And this entire period culminated in his final grand vision, the announcement in late 1965 of plans for Disney World in Florida. This included the Magic Kingdom, a significantly larger, more elaborate version of Disneyland, plus resorts and other leisure components.
But the true heart of that Florida project wasn't the amusement park. It was the Experimental Prototype Community of Tomorrow, EPCOT. The sources describe this as a radical departure.
It was radical. He described EPCOT not as a fixed destination or a park, but as a never-completed functional living community, a true urban planning experiment. It was meant to be a showcase for new ideas and new technologies and act as a showcase to the world for the ingenuity and imagination of American free enterprise. It would house residents, operate new transit systems, and constantly introduce and test new ways of living. This truly captures the sheer scale of his ambition right up until his final year. He was simultaneously an animator, a film producer, a theme park designer, and an urban futurist.
It's hard to reconcile the scale of that ambition with the complexity of the man himself. Let's shift now to Section 7, looking at the personal character and the overwhelming honor and recognition he received throughout his life.
The sources reveal a fascinating disparity between his public persona and the private man. Publicly, he was the warm, outgoing Uncle Walt, synonymous with kindness and fantasy.
The man you saw on television every week.
Exactly. Privately, he was described as almost painfully shy, diffident, and insecure. The playwright Robert E. Sherwood noted this internal struggle. Disney himself even acknowledged that he was often consciously playing the role of Walt Disney for the public and the media.
Yet, despite any private insecurity, his professional standards were absolute and uncompromising, and that defined the culture of the studio.
His expectations for those with whom he worked were exceptionally high. He demanded technical perfection. Longtime staff knew that the phrase, "that'll work," from Disney was actually a signal of high praise.
It meant it was a success that had met his incredibly elevated benchmark.
Precisely. And high-performing staff were rewarded generously, often with financial bonuses or high recommendations, reflecting his desire to foster and retain the best talent in the world.
We should briefly touch upon his personal life, showing the balance he sought. He married the ink artist Lillian Bounds in 1925, and they had 2 daughters, Diane and Sharon, who was adopted. The sources note they were careful to shield their children from the intense public scrutiny and fame.
And we circle back to his lifelong love of trains. After moving to Holmby Hills in 1949, he developed and personally built this complex 1/8 scale miniature live steam railroad in his massive backyard. He called it the Carrollwood Pacific Railroad.
And the working steam locomotive was built by a studio engineer and affectionately named the Lily Bell after his wife.
Which is just wonderful. And this isn't just a hobby. It reflects that deep intersection of his creative pursuits. High-precision engineering, complex mechanical operation, meticulous design with his personal joy.
Now let's talk about the recognition.
Yeah.
His award tally is, simply put, a historical record that may never be broken.
The numbers are astounding. He received 59 Academy Award nominations and won 26 total awards, 22 competitive, 4 honorary. Both of those figures remain records for an individual. It just reflects his consistent output and innovation across so many categories.
And the recognition spanned far beyond Hollywood. He received 2 Golden Globe Special Achievement Awards for Bambi and the Living Desert, plus the Cecil B. DeMille Award. He also won an Emmy Award for Best Producer for the Disneyland television series.
And his influence was recognized at the highest levels of government and culture. He received the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 1964, the highest civilian award in the U.S. Posthumously, he was awarded the Congressional Gold Medal in 1968. Internationally, he was inducted into the French Légion d'honneur way back in 1935, demonstrating that his work was recognized as vital cultural output worldwide.
His enduring cinematic legacy is preserved for all time. Several of his films are included in the National Film Registry by the Library of Congress as culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. That list includes Snow White, Fantasia, Pinocchio, Dumbo, The Three Little Pigs, Steamboat Willie, and Mary Poppins.
Disney died of lung cancer in December 1966 at age 65. And even after his death, his films continued to receive accolades. The Jungle Book and the short Winnie the Pooh and the Blustery Day were released posthumously, with the latter earning him yet another Academy Award in 1968.
What happened immediately after his passing speaks volumes about the infrastructure he created. His brother Roy immediately deferred his own retirement plans to ensure the Florida project was completed.
Yeah.
He dedicated the inauguration of Disney World in 1971 to Walt.
And while his final ambitious vision for EPCOT, the Functional Living City, wasn't fully realized.
It opened in 1982 as a park more akin to a permanent World's Fair.
Right. But the magnitude of his achievement remains incomparable. Journalists correctly compared his success to the most successful industrialist in history, and he remains the central figure in the history of animation and a national cultural icon. His legacy is continually celebrated, with the Walt Disney Family Museum opening in San Francisco in 2009, dedicated to showcasing thousands of artifacts detailing his creative journey.
What an astonishing, multifaceted career. We've tracked his impact from the introduction of synchronized sound and the establishment of full color in animation, through the pioneering of the feature-length cartoon, and finally to the invention of the modern immersive theme park. He successfully transformed what was once a marginal form of entertainment cartoons into a multinational leisure industry giant.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, Disney's true genius wasn't just in mastering one form of media, it was in creating seamless, quality entertainment across wildly disparate mediums: film, television, music, and physical space. All of it designed to give audiences a shared, immersive, quality experience.
He was orchestrating total brand synergy decades before business schools even defined the term.
Exactly. That holistic approach, demanding excellence in every single output, is the common thread that runs through his entire career, regardless of whether he was animating a mouse or engineering a monorail system.
And that brings us to our final provocative thought. Despite his record-setting achievements, his global fame, and his status as a national icon, the source material notes that Disney continued to work tirelessly. He even received a story credit in the 1966 film El Teen Robin Crusoe USN under a pseudonym,
Retlaw Yensid,
which is his name, Walter Disney, spelled backwards. What stands out to you about a man who, despite having achieved more recognition and success than anyone in history, continued to innovate, to experiment, and to contribute under an anonymous pseudonym right up until his final year?
This powerful, innate drive for continuous anonymous creation, it's perhaps the ultimate final testament to his pure creative spirit.